Leia could have been one of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy, perhaps even greater than Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. But every time she felt her mind slip into the Force, something went wrong. Although she tried her hardest to focus on the light side, it was more difficult for her than her brother. Like a monster lurking just out of sight, the dark side called to Leia, and sometimes she answered. Once, when she tapped into the dark side to save her child's life, she couldn't cut it off. What happened? This is today's underrated moment. 11 years after the destruction of the Death Star and only 7 years after the final days of Palpatine's rule, Leia found herself in a heated argument with her brother. By this point, Luke Skywalker was far more than a farm boy from Tatooine that scored a lucky shot against the Death Star. He had come fully into his own. When he walked through the halls of Coruscant's New Republic Senate, the assembly of mid-rim politicians and newly inducted Outer Rim senators looked at Luke with the same sort of reverence that Yoda used to receive. He was not just a Jedi. He was the hero who rebuilt the entire Order from scratch, and it wasn't easy. Thanks to Palpatine, most of the Jedi Order had been wiped out. It started with the smelting of over 1,000 confiscated lightsabers, days after the execution of Order 66, and only got worse from there. By the time Palpatine finally died and Luke departed the core worlds to discover Jedi secrets for himself, he managed to track down a few surviving relics. On one distant world, he discovered Jacasta's news abandoned safe house of a select few Jedi records. And then on Ossus, once a thriving Jedi stronghold, Luke unearthed the chest of ancient Kyber-powered lightsabers. With such a paltry selection of tools at his disposal, Skywalker had his work cut out for him. But he made it work, and by 11 years after the Battle of Yavin, the new Jedi Order was a new but powerful presence in the galaxy. But for all of their progress, Luke couldn't figure out why his sister, someone with the same natural Force talents that he possessed, refused to train to become a Jedi. She was a child of Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, and was actually the person Yoda had preferred to train all those years ago on the swamp-covered world of Dagobah. Why did Leia refuse to finish her training? When Luke asked her over and over again, Leia gave him the same series of answers she had recited over the years. She needed to focus on her family. The galaxy needed her in the Senate. She simply chose a different path for her life. Any of these answers would have been enough on their own, but Luke couldn't help but sense something else was at play. As they walked through the unusually sunny streets of Coruscant's political district on the way to Leia's residence next to the Senate floor, Leia continued to push her lies further and further away from credulity. At one point, she brought up another excuse, that for some reason the Force had put up a barrier to her. We both know I've reached some kind of barrier in my growth as a Jedi which I can't seem to get past, she said. Luke had heard this one a few times before, and it was getting harder and harder for him to acknowledge Leia's claim without pointing out that it was an obvious lie. After all, Luke was the most powerful Jedi in the Republic, and he would have sensed a disturbance within Leia strong enough to block her Force training. With a grin, Luke stroked his chin in the very place that a long gray beard would have grown years later. As he eyed Leia, wondering whether or not he should call her out for such an obvious lie, he decided better of it. He wouldn't give up his dreams, that Leia would join him at the new Jedi Temple and help in the training of younglings, but she obviously wasn't interested. Sensing it was the right time to leave, Luke escorted Leia to her small residential apartment and left her alone. When her brother was far enough away that he wouldn't be able to sense her thoughts, Leia finally breathed a sigh of relief and let her guard down. She knew everything that she had told Luke was a lie. Sure, she wanted to spend more time with her family, and she wanted to be a force for good within the political parties of the New Republic, but that's not why she decided to quit her training to become a Jedi. The truth was far darker. Every time Leia delved into the Force, she felt the presence of a shadow on the periphery of her senses. She couldn't bear to look at it head on, but she knew it wasn't the light side. Like her father, Anakin Skywalker, she was filled with unresolved rage, perhaps for the way the Emperor cruelly deceived her father in the early days of the Empire, or more likely, for the horrible destruction of her home planet at the hands of Grand Moff Tarkin and the Empire's abominable killing machine, the Death Star. With so much pain and devastation in her life, it made perfect sense for Leia's mind to be tortured and twisted. But once, while walking her children between the giant Veshka ferns of a nearby botanical garden, Leia let the dark side consume her. The afternoon started out like any other day. Jason and Jaina, already 2 years old, ran in long zigzags along the gravel path, with the giant wall of imported soul trees from Endor that seemed to block all noise. The distant whirring of merchant starships from the trading district of Coruscant were barely louder than passing bugs. While Leia watched her youngest children push and play around the park, she couldn't help but wonder if she was neglecting her youngest, Anakin. All three of her children came all at once, and she never seemed to have enough time to spend with each of them individually. But today she was making up for it. Soon, as they turned a corner around a small monument to one of Coruscant's lesser-known ministers from yesteryears, a young woman caught Leia's eye. Dressed in all red, the stranger was hardly the high-brow politicians Leia was used to meeting, and soon Leia would realize why. With a quick swipe, the stranger received an LL-30 blaster pistol from her side, a particularly rare model of gun that was popular with some of the Derosian bounty hunters from the Outer Rim. It was a high-caliber weapon, but more importantly, it was expensive. Whoever this bounty hunter was, she was being paid well to bring Leia in. Had this been any other day, Leia might have let the woman get off easy. She might have even let the hunter capture her in order to avoid taking someone's life. But Leia's three children, Anakin, Jason, and Jaina, were helpless toddlers. There was no telling what this psychotic assassin was willing to do, and if it were just Leia that they had been ordered to kill, and not the entire line of Skywalker descendants, which would have included her children. Knowing what she had to do, but hating that she had to do it, Leia quickly threw her right hand into the air and used the Force to snap the hunter's head into the stone monument behind her. The woman moved so quickly and so violently that little Anakin's eyes turned wide, and he froze with fear at the mere sight of the nearly dead soldier. "Hold it right there, Your Highness!" a rough voice shouted from behind. Two more assassins, garbed in thick plexicarbon armor, snuck up on Leia and her kids from behind. Barely holding her rage at bay, Leia entered a trance. Acting on instinct more than anything else, she unclipped her blue lightsaber from her waist and turned to face her attackers. As they unleashed a volley of red blaster fire from their rifles, Leia threw herself in front of young Anakin and deflected each and every round. With another violent pull of the Force, the female Skywalker pulled a massive sultry limb onto the assassin who forgot to wear his helmet, while she charged at the other. The red bolts flew faster and faster, but each one met the blue plasma of Leia's blade. As she closed the ground between her and the hunter, time slowed down. Each red blaster that rocked towards her burned the air around it as they whizzed by, moved as slow as a bantha. Leia could see every round, and with the Force now pulsating through her body like an uncontrollable lightning storm, she deftly deflected each one. Young Anakin, Jason, and Jaina looked on helplessly as they peeked their heads over a metal bench. They had never seen their mother like this before. Even when they visited the memorial on the Galactic Civil War, the holo presentation of their uncle and grandfather's terrifying duel beneath Cloud City was gentle by comparison to her fury. Once Leia finally reached the final assassin, she cut his blaster in half with her blue blade and with a leaping kick sent him flying. Sometime during the battle, the first assassin, the red jumpsuit garbed woman, regained consciousness and snuck up on Leia. With the ragged knife, a relic from an Imperial naval officer's uniform, she lunged at the politician. But by this point, Leia was nothing more than a conduit for the Force, and she sensed the assassin's approach. Without even having to look behind her, Leia balled her hand into a fist and cracked it into the assassin's nose, sending her back to sleep. Surveying the pile of bodies, Leia hesitated to turn off her blue blade. For a brief moment, she was wondering if she would have let them live. Wouldn't her family be better off if the assassins were all dead and 6 feet under the ground? In that moment, Leia couldn't fathom how much like her father she truly was. More than Luke, she tried to reject the fact that she was the descendant of Anakin Skywalker. But here, beneath the imported soul trees of Endor, the planet that had hosted her father's funeral pyre, she showed how much like the chosen one she really was. After all, she was contemplating damning her own soul by embracing the dark side and killing the 3 unconscious assassins in order to save her own family. Anakin, in his tragic fall, sought the same exact thing, to protect Padme and the lives of Luke and Leia. But once Leia turned to see her children, the pull of the dark side disappeared, as if she had been yanked back from a ledge at the very last second. Leia breathed a sigh of relief, disengaged her lightsaber, and walked over to little Anakin, Jaina, and Jason. But the temptation of the dark side wasn't done with her yet. Another one of the assassins, the helmetless brute she had struck with a tree branch, woke up. He quietly reached over to the Scope E11 blaster rifle that was laying on the grass and leapt to his feet. By the time he pulled the trigger, Leia had already reignited her blue blade, and just as before, the Force plunged in her body into a higher plane. Moving faster than the assassin could track, Leia deflected 2 shots, then leapt into the air. With a quick downward stroke of her lightsaber, she sliced the assassin's right arm off at its elbow, leaving behind a sizzling stump of flesh and green cloth. The fight should have ended there, but Leia wouldn't let it. Even before, after initially defeating the assassins, Leia struggled with what to do, and now her worst fear had come true. Her compassion had allowed for one of the killers to try, yet again, to take her life, and that of her children. As the blade inched closer to the assassin's face, Leia felt an invisible force reassure her that this man's death, the death of the two other unconscious assassins laying on the ground beside him, would be just. But then something happened. She looked at the man's face, the contours of his skin scratched in grotesque grimace as he expected his own imminent death. Leia was struck by a memory. She had seen this expression before, and then when she looked at the assassin's reflective tunic, Leia was shocked to see her own savage expression. Her teeth, like the sharp grin of a Nexu, were exposed in an evil snarl, and her eyes were almost entirely black. "Vader," she said to herself as she connected the dots. In that moment, as she protected her young children from the assassin, Leia realized how deceptive the dark side was. She thought that she was being a hero, defending Anakin, Jaina, and Jacen. But in truth, the dark side was manipulating her for its own ends. That's how her father, Anakin Skywalker, must have been deceived. She realized just as she was willing to kill the assassin today, her father must have killed, at least at first, with the same sense of purpose. Now that she knew how easy it was to fall prey to the dark side and how powerful she could be, Leia decided that she could never again allow herself to be tempted. As New Republic officers handcuffed and gathered the assassins, Leia promised to herself she would cut herself off, not just from Jedi combat training, but from her full potential of the Force altogether. In order to keep her brother Luke satisfied, Leia merely pretended to train so that she would never discover the horrifying truth. If she ever became a powerful Jedi, it would only take so long before she would become a terrifying Sith, more powerful than Vader in his mutilated form had ever been.